In 2019, Toyota settled a class action lawsuit in the United States involving over 1.4 million vehicles. The complaint was not about engines, not about safety recalls, not about brake failures. It was about paint. Specifically, it was about factory clear coat that was peeling, chalking, and dying on vehicles that were, in some cases, less than 5 years old. The settlement amount ran into tens of millions of dollars. And here's what makes that story interesting to us. The average cost to have a single panel professionally repainted at a body shop in the United States is between $800 and $1,500. A full vehicle respray, even a modest one, runs between $3,000 and $5,000. The global automotive paint and coatings market, right now, is valued at over $50 billion a year. $50 billion annually. To fix, coat, and repaint surfaces that, in many cases, do not need to be repainted at all. Because what if the solution to most oxidized, chalky, apparently dead automotive paint, the kind that looks flat and gray and hopeless in your driveway, costs under $3? What if it fits in the palm of your hand? What if it has been documented and proven for over a century, and the only reason you don't know about it is that there is absolutely no money to be made by telling you? That is what this video is about. And I promise, by the time we're done, you will never look at a faded car the same way again. Before we get to the solution, we need to get the problem exactly right. Because most people, and most mechanics, frankly, have been given an incomplete explanation of what actually happens to automotive paint over time. Here is what you have probably been told. Your car's paint fades because it gets old, because UV light breaks it down, and because the only solution is to cut through the damage with a rubbing compound or, eventually, repaint it. That explanation is partially true, but it is missing the most important part. Modern automotive paint is a layered system. Beneath the color coat sits a primer. Above it sits a clear coat, typically a polyurethane or acrylic resin. That is the actual protective layer. That clear coat is transparent, hard, and its job is to take the punishment that UV radiation, acid rain, temperature cycling, and atmospheric oxidation would otherwise deliver directly to your color. When clear coat fails, it does not simply wear away cleanly. What happens is this. UV radiation and oxygen attack the polymer chains in the resin. Those chains fracture. The surface develops what are called microfractures, thousands of tiny cracks and pits per square centimeter, invisible to the naked eye, but collectively responsible for the chalky, hazy, flat appearance we associate with old paint. These microfractures scatter light rather than reflecting it cleanly, which is why oxidized paint looks dead. The pigment beneath is often completely intact. The color hasn't gone anywhere. Now, here is where rubbing compound and machine polishing come in. And here's why they are, at best, a temporary fix and, at worst, a road toward the problem they claim to solve. Rubbing compound works by abrading the surface. It physically removes the top layer of damaged clear coat, the part with the microfractures, to reveal the slightly less damaged layer beneath. This works. The paint looks better. But you have also made your clear coat thinner. Every time you polish, you remove a few more microns. A typical clear coat is between 50 and 100 microns thick. An aggressive machine polish removes 5 to 10 microns in a single session. Do the maths. You have, at most, 10 to 15 serious machine polishes before you are cutting into base coat. And once the clear coat is gone, the only option is respray. So the industry's primary solution to paint degradation is a process that accelerates paint degradation. Think about that for a moment. To find the chemistry that actually solves this problem, not temporarily, not destructively, we need to go back to Stuttgart in 1901. A young German chemist named Otto Röhm was writing his doctoral dissertation at the University of Tübingen on the polymerization of acrylic acid. He was, at that point, one of the very few scientists in the world studying what we now call acrylic polymers. Röhm spent the next 3 decades developing what would eventually become plexiglass, the first commercially viable acrylic glass, patented in 1933. But in the process of understanding how acrylic polymers behave, Röhm and his contemporaries documented something that would later prove crucial to paint restoration. Acrylic and polyurethane polymer chains, when fractured, are capable of what chemists call capillary absorption. That is, broken polymer matrices actively draw certain nonpolar hydrocarbons into the fracture through capillary action, the same physical mechanism by which a paper towel absorbs water. The fractures in degraded clear coat do not passively accept a filler. They pull it in. And if the molecule doing the filling, the hydrocarbon, closely matches the refractive index of the surrounding polymer, then light traveling through the repaired surface behaves as though the fracture was never there. This is not a cosmetic trick. It is optical physics. And it is the scientific foundation of everything that follows. The knowledge of which hydrocarbons produce the best refractive index match for acrylic and polyurethane resins was developed gradually across the mid-20th century, not primarily in automotive laboratories, but in optics, in lens manufacturing, and most unexpectedly, in the world of scale model building. Which brings us to the discovery that changed the game. Here is the part of the story that most people find uncomfortable, not because it involves shadowy conspiracies, but because it involves something much more mundane and much harder to argue against: market incentives. The automotive paint industry does not profit from restoration. It profits from replacement. This is not cynicism. It is simply the economic reality of a sector structured around manufacturing, application, and recurring service contracts. A product that costs $3 and restores paint to factory condition for 1 to 3 years is not commercially interesting to an industry that charges $800 per panel for professional correction. Consider how the detailing market evolved. In the 1970s and 1980s, as the automotive aftermarket expanded, synthetic polymer chemistry was advancing rapidly. New compounds, new sealants, new coatings appeared on shelves. The marketing of these products was built on a concept that sounds logical but contains a hidden assumption that the best solution is always the newest, most technologically complex solution. Ceramic coatings at $500, graphene spray sealants at $80, nano coating systems that require professional application. What this marketing narrative quietly displaced was not inferior technology. It was older, cheaper, and in many respects more appropriate technology. The concentration of carnauba wax in retail paste waxes, which stood at 30 to 40% in professional-grade products in the 1950s, had dropped to between 2 and 8% in most consumer products by the 1990s. Not because lower concentration works better, but because lower concentration produces a product that needs to be reapplied more frequently, purchased more often, and marketed against a benchmark of convenience rather than efficacy. The replacement economy replaced the repair economy, and the knowledge of how to repair, rather than replace, retreated into the margins, into hobbyist forums, into old trade manuals, into the world of scale model builders who, it turns out, have been sitting on the answer for decades. Scale model builders work with acrylic paints and clear coats applied in very thin layers over plastic substrates. The surfaces they deal with are, chemically, near identical to the clear coat on a full-sized vehicle. And they have a problem. Painted plastic canopies, the transparent sections on aircraft models, for example, develop microhaze and fine scratching that destroys optical clarity. Sometime in the mid-1980s, model builders in the United States began experimenting with Future 4 Polish, a product sold as an acrylic floor coating for linoleum and vinyl floors, manufactured by SC Johnson. Future, as they called it, is a water-based acrylic solution with a refractive index specifically engineered to produce maximum clarity on acrylic substrates. When applied to a hazed plastic canopy, it wicked into the micro-scratches by capillary action, cured to a clear, hard, optically matched surface, and restored transparency that the builders had assumed was permanently lost. The model building community documented this obsessively. Forums, photographs, before and afters going back to the late 1980s form one of the most well-documented accidental discoveries in DIY chemistry. They were not restoring car paint, but they were demonstrating, on a small scale, the exact physical and optical mechanism that works at full scale on automotive clear coat. And then people began to test it on cars. The results were not subtle. Chalky enamel paint on vehicles from the 1970s and 1980s, paint that had been written off, returned to gloss that required a gloss meter to believe. Not perfectly, not permanently, but dramatically, inexpensively, and repeatedly. The compound responsible was not exotic. It was a $3 floor polish. And it worked because of chemistry that Otto Rome's generation would have recognized immediately. So what does this look like in practice? Let's be precise, because the method matters. There are two effective approaches, depending on your paint type and the degree of oxidation. The first uses a food-grade mineral oil and high-concentration carnauba wax. The second uses an acrylic floor coating, the future floor polish method, either alone or as a final layer over the mineral oil treatment. Both work. They work on different paint systems and for different reasons. Let me walk you through both. Method 1 is the mineral oil and carnauba approach, and it works best on single-stage enamel paint, the type found on most vehicles made before 1995, as well as on agricultural equipment, commercial machinery, and older trucks. These paints have no separate clear coat. The color coat is the surface, and when it oxidizes, it does so at the top few microns of pigmented resin. You will need two things: food-grade mineral oil, sold as liquid paraffin or unscented baby oil at any pharmacy for under $2 for a 500 milliliters bottle, and raw Brazilian carnauba wax at 50% concentration or higher, sold as candle-making supply under the labels Carnauba T1 Flakes or Yellow Carnauba Pastilles. Expect to pay $2 to $4 for 100 grams, which is enough to treat an entire vehicle twice. The process: wash and thoroughly dry the vehicle. Apply a thin, even coat of mineral oil to one panel at a time using a clean microfiber cloth, working it in with light circular pressure. Watch the panel. Within seconds, as the oil penetrates the microfractures by capillary action, depth and color return to the surface in a way that is genuinely startling the first time you witness it. Allow the oil to absorb for 30 to 45 minutes. Do not wipe it off. You are not removing it, you are sealing it in. Now apply your carnauba. If you have raw flakes, melt a small quantity in a glass jar sitting in hot water. Allow it to cool to a soft paste. Apply a thin coat over the oiled surface using a foam applicator. Work in sections no larger than 1 square meter. Allow it to haze. This takes 10 to 15 minutes in normal conditions. Then buff off firmly with a clean, dry microfiber. The carnauba forms a crystalline cross-linked layer over the restored surface. It does not sit loosely on top. It bonds. Method 2, the acrylic floor coating approach, is more effective on modern two-stage base coat/clear coat systems, particularly where the clear coat has developed haze and micro-scratching rather than deep oxidation. Products sold for floor care that are water-based acrylic formulas perform best here. Apply a thin, even coat with a soft foam applicator to a clean, dry surface. Allow it to cure for 1 hour at room temperature. Apply a second coat. Allow to cure overnight. The optical result on hazed clear coat is, in documented tests, an improvement from 15 to 20 gloss units to 65 to 75 gloss units, achieved without removing a single micron of your existing clear coat. Total material cost for either method, under $5. Time required, 2 to 3 hours for a full vehicle. And because neither process is abrasive, because you are adding material, not removing it, there is no degradation limit. You can repeat the process every 1 to 2 years without any concern about thinning your paint. Now, and this matters, because a script that withholds the truth is not a script worth watching, let me be honest about what this method cannot do. It is not permanent. The mineral oil and carnauba treatment, in real-world conditions, lasts between 1 and 3 years depending on climate, UV exposure, and how the vehicle is stored. The acrylic floor coating method performs similarly. These are not one-time fixes. They are maintenance cycles. Cheaper than any professional alternative by an order of magnitude, but still recurring. On paint with physical damage, chips, deep scratches, rust beneath the surface, or clear coat that is peeled away entirely rather than simply microfractured, neither method will produce a satisfactory result. You are restoring optical properties and filling microfractures. You are not rebuilding destroyed material. And for vehicles where the paint has gone beyond restoration, where the oxidation is full depth, where the color coat has grayed completely, where the substrate is compromised, a professional respray is the correct answer. These methods are not competitors to professional paintwork. They are alternatives to unnecessary professional paintwork. The distinction matters. I say this because the most credible thing this channel can do is tell you when not to use a solution, not just when to use one. Trust is built on accuracy, not enthusiasm. So here's where I want to leave you. Not with a product recommendation, but with an idea. There is a pattern in the history of consumer technology that repeats with remarkable consistency. A problem emerges. A complex, expensive solution is developed and marketed. That solution becomes the industry standard. And in the process, an older, simpler, cheaper solution, one that may work equally well for most cases, is not suppressed or banned. It is simply made invisible by the logic of a market that has no mechanism to profit from it. Dead paint is the example we use today. But the pattern extends far beyond automotive surfaces. It shows up in building insulation, in water filtration, in food preservation, in energy generation. Everywhere that replacement is more profitable than repair, the repair knowledge retreats. Not because it fails, because it cannot be metered, packaged, or sold at scale. Otto Rome's understanding of capillary action in acrylic polymers. A generation of model builders in 1980s America. A polish that costs $3. Together, they contain the answer to a problem that a $50 billion industry has been paid, year after year, to make appear unsolvable. Dead paint is not dead. It is waiting. And now you know how to wake it up. Industries sell replacement. Chemistry sometimes allows restoration. And the gap between those two things, that gap is where the knowledge that actually helps you lives. Wildline exists to find that gap, document it, and give it to you directly. If that kind of knowledge matters to you, subscribing is the simplest way to make sure the next discovery reaches you before the algorithm buries it. We put a new one out every single week. And speaking of buried knowledge, there is a passive cooling system used in the Persian Empire over 2,000 years ago that drops indoor temperatures by up to 15 degrees Celsius with no electricity, no refrigerant, and a construction cost under $50. The HVAC industry has no interest in you ever hearing about it. I've covered exactly that in this video. Make sure you have a look at this one.